right. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Cantina Chronicles. Very special edition of Cantina Chronicles. We're going to continue our series of discussions on Timothyzahn's Legends Thrawn Trilogy, concluding with The Last Command today. But since this is the finale of the trilogy, we thought we'd invite an expert to the Mumbai store of Cantina this week. Meg Dowell, welcome to Cantina Chronicles.
Hello. I'm so glad to be back. It's been so long.
Yeah, it's been a full rotation, I think.
A few cycles.
So it's great to have you back. So if our listeners don't know, Meg is Dork Side of the Force's site expert. She's a journalist and a photographer and a book reviewer and a Star Wars fan, most importantly, to us. In addition to being a regular contributor to Dork Side of the Force, she is the purveyor of Star Wars book reviews on Instagram, where she reviews Star Wars books and posts beautiful pictures of her vast Star Wars book collection. I'm really enjoying seeing the book dojo behind you today. It's nice to do this live. It's great. They're like threatening to cave you in over there on your right, but it looks steady. She is also the host of Now This Is Lit podcast, one of my faves, an ongoing series of interviews, discussions, and deep dives into the rapidly expanding world of Star Wars storytelling. Please listen to that podcast and give that ever-important 5-star review, as well as the Starboard Dawn podcast, which is one of my favorites. I noticed you haven't done one in a year. They're kind of periodical, but I love the spirit of that podcast where it sort of talks about the hope that is pulled out of Star Wars stories, which makes me feel warm and fuzzy. Meg joined us almost exactly a year ago. We talked about Adam Christopher's Shadow of the Sith last time. That's right. But we were still employed by Grex Kondak and Core World News at that point. So
we bring him back for pivotal canon discussions.
Yes.
I
had this in mind.
Sith, now Thrawn before Ahsoka comes out. Like we need expertise on these issues, and Meg brings it. So thank you for being here, Meg. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Cool. How you doing, Meg? Things okay? Things going well?
Things are good. I had just, now that I'm remembering when I was here last, I just started Now This Is Lit, and there had probably been like a couple episodes up,
or just one just posted.
So I just started, and I didn't really know if, I knew I was going to keep doing it, but I didn't know like where it would go. And now I get to interview Star Wars authors, and that's wild. I never thought that I would ever get to do that, and I love doing it because I love kind of being able to talk to these storytellers about like what these stories mean to them and why they're important.
Yes.
And it means so much to me that I get to do that, and I can't tell you what's coming up, but exciting things. So I'm so happy to like be here.
You have embargo access, right? Like what's in the pipeline a little bit.
I do. Don't look too closely.
Oh yeah,
may or not be here.
Oh my gosh.
They're well hidden off frame. Constructed frame.
But there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in the Star Wars book world overall, and I'm happy to be here and talk about books and talk about probably one of the most formative and important trilogies of books that there has ever been. So
here we are.
Can we get into overall impressions like right away? Just
let's go.
Dive in, because I mean, if you take the Heir to the Empire trilogy at face value, like this was the novelized, sequel to the original trilogy, endorsed by Lucasfilm as this sort of blockbuster follow-up, just in a novelized form, and you kind of reconfigure your thinking about the galaxy and what's possible, and sort of like you just go back to your thinking that you had when you first saw the original trilogy. These books are super rewarding. So I just want to get that, like, if you kind of reconfigure how you think about Star Wars, and you kind of go back in time and you look at these books from a continuation of the original trilogy, they're like so special. Like there's nothing like them, and Zahn is a true master. It's incredible stuff.
Yeah, I mean that was the thing that I sort of missed on. I think when I have a smattering of Legends experience and books that I just sort of picked up, as I explained, sort of in various airports. I just sort of grabbed one and read it. But I wasn't prepared that it was a Timothyzahn like series, and like how he how he gets to play with all the original trilogy characters.
Right.
And it's you know,
It's
like in
everyone.
in his canon series, I feel like they're all super, like they're really naval tactics focused. But this really showed off like his narrative skill and all that to me. What do you think, Meg? When was the first time you read the Thrawn trilogy? Like, what do you feel about it?
So this will surprise probably most people. And that is that I read this trilogy for the first time probably a couple of years ago.
Oh, really?
I just read it this week, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read it when I was
man.
young, forgot it,
man.
and read it again recently.
Yeah.
So it's all fresh.
It's so fun to revisit things you haven't read in a while.
Yep.
Or like, you've heard about these books. You probably, if you're in Star Wars fandom, you've probably heard of Heir to the Empire, even if you don't know what it is. And so being able to jump in, like even if you picked up one of these books tonight and started reading it, like you are a part of it, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So before the prequels ended and before like we had that gap between not the big gap, but the gap between the prequels and the sequels, I was very into the expanded universe, but I didn't know a lot about it and I didn't know how many books there actually were. And so I was trying my best, I remember, to like get as much information about what happened after like Return of the Jedi as I could. And I never got around to this trilogy for some reason, because I remember like once I discovered there were books, that was like it for me. Like I was already a fan of Star Wars, but then it was like, oh, I can read Star Wars. And that was like, I'm in it for life, and I am still here.
Yeah, you're leading the charge, actually.
Sure.
In a lot of ways.
No, but I mean, Meg, it sounds like you and I had a similar journey with the old EU. I mean, I tell the story. I told the story last week that I really read these books when they came out, like 1991, 1992, 1993. I was 11, 12, and 13. And I just happened to walk into my local library and find out, like, there's books about Star Wars. And then I read these three, and then by the time I had finished this, I loved it, the Last Command. And then I had kind of like, I turned 13, I went to high school, I was kind of like, or going into high school, and I was kind of like, Star Wars, this is dorky, even though I go home and watch Star Wars all the time. I was a sellout because it was the 90s. And I kind of left a little bit of that behind. And then when I got into college and grad school, similarly, I did all the in college, I did all of the midnight showings for the prequels. And I was like, oh, that's right. There are those books. I've never read those books. And I, because I am a nerd, got the entire old EU in universe chronological order and began reading them in chronological order, including the comics.
Oh.
You don't know this, but the rest do. I started that in 2003. I just completed that journey. 2 months ago. Yeah. 2 months ago, I finished. I have read all of the EU in chronological order. I remember none of it. I remember nothing about it, but I read it all anyway. But I do. It was just this idea of, because I stopped after the Lucasfilm purchase, or after the Disney purchase, because I was just like, it doesn't count anymore. And then I'm like, well, no, these are books.
Extra counts. Yeah.
The extra counts written.
Oh, they
that
definitely count.
And
if anything, they're the well now. Yeah.
They're so good. Anyway, so that was my quick journey with the old EU and Zahn in particular.
Ben, when did you get started with these books?
Oh yeah, I mean like 3 weeks ago, really. Like I thought I had read Air, but I don't remember. I didn't recognize anything, so it must have been a different book, because there was like Thrawn was in it, and so was Akbar, so it must have been the later Thrawn trilogy or duology that came out in like 2014 or 2015, I think. But yeah, so it was just fresh. So I was just like, oh my goodness. And I was really pushing back on it the whole way, because like I am like a canon hardcore. Like I need to have very distinct
everything needs to fit in the box.
Yes, yeah. It needs to jive. And I'm like, I don't know. I know that like Leia is pregnant with twins, and that's not what happened in canon. And like I thought that was good.
On the inverse side of that graph, for sure. I'm like, I'll accept anything as canon.
Yeah, which is probably much more. I think
it's all a valuable idea.
Yeah.
It's all it's all just wonderful ideations.
But the point is that quickly went away. And I mean, there's actually very, very little deviation really from, like, they, Lucasfilm and Disney's Lucasfilm has tread carefully around this trilogy, and really hasn't done too much to quash any of the major theories.
There hasn't been any like post Disney endorsement aside of recent times with the Ahsoka trailer and a clear line to heir to the empire and mentions in Mandalorian. It's like before that, there really hasn't been that endorsement. And in the fandom, I feel like this trilogy is like oftentimes jested about, or like the cloning is just dreaded by fans. Like people just don't want to see clones, and like they think the Sabaoth, like the Jorah Sabaoth, like outbursts are kind of I don't know, just comedic in nature. And I'm like, I would argue the opposite. I would say this book is actually, if you really read this book and you really get into the character design and like the quarrels between characters, I think it's actually pretty mature and grounded and gritty. And like, I think it's a wonderful continuation of the original trilogy. And I think it's like brilliant because you don't have all this Sith kind of dilution of Star Wars. It's like that original trilogy, like the Jedi are kind of the main mystical faction. And it's like, and so the villain is like a Jedi essentially, and I think that's so interesting. I was like, oh, it's just a twisted Jedi. Like that's so fun. And so I don't know. There's something cool about that to me. And so I feel like the fandom kind of kept me away from the books for a while just because of how they're talked about. And I think that I just would just urge people to just jump back into them because I think they've been wrongly labeled and like wrongly maligned. So just throw that out there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I couldn't help but like envision this on the big screen and how things would play out. And it's tough to do because obviously in a novel there's so much more. You couldn't, shot for shot these books in less than like 6 hours each or something. But there's so many very, very cinematic moments, and even in this book, with the advent of Luke. Like, which I knew about, like I knew it was going to happen because it's always alive.
It's perfect though.
It's my joke answer to everything.
It was like I still felt it. Like I still felt the like oh my gosh, like how heavy that moment was, even knowing it was coming.
Yeah, and I do love marajade. I think I kind of disagree with Lucas. I love how hard marajade hits in this book, and like she takes out Luke, she takes out Jeruis, like she's like the all-time victor at the end in terms of conquering her fears. Like it's kind of that story is hers, which is great. And the only thing is I do wish Leia did more Jedi stuff. That's it. But it's just that's like a minor.
It's true. I mean, I don't know how to say it's not being whatever, but she does more in this book than they give her to do in the sequel trilogies.
Yeah.
Right? This is not me. I like the sequel trilogies quite a bit, but I'm saying like that's when I was reading this, I'm like, oh, that's right. Like we get Leia Jedi stuff, at least like tinkering with the Force, feeling, communicating, trying to figure it out, how to use it.
Thrawn is
Meg.
Is he?
Meg, what's your take on Marajade in terms of like how do you feel about Marajade?
I like her. I really do, and I always have. And I like her story, especially in this trilogy, and I like where her story goes after this. And I like Zahn does such a good job with establishing her character and then like moving her through all of these things and getting her to this end point that you may not expect. And then there's what I love, being so far away from it now is there's so much more. Like it doesn't end with a trilogy and we have to like wait for more. What happens? It's all there. Like the great thing, or one of many great things about like Legends, for example, is like if you read one of these books and you're like, oh, I love Marajade, there's so much more that you can explore. Like it almost never. I mean, it does end eventually.
It does end.
But no, I love her character. Yeah, it does, unfortunately. But the great thing about Legends, one of many great things, is that like you can start it and you can finish it, and it feels like I haven't done that, but it's an accomplishment, and you can do that, and you can say, I did that.
Well,
canon, it just
so I have a sickness which is called completeism. Like I cannot finish something I've started. In terms of pop culture, which has cursed me. Watched all 15 seasons of Supernatural. So like, for example,
so you've done Spectres of the Past and Visions of the Future.
Oh yeah,
follow-ups.
Yeah. I realize there are a couple.
Duology.
Yes, so that's what, like Ben. I mentioned that there was the Thrawn duology, and you're like, well, it's like, oh, he lives at the end of this.
Venturing to that.
He's like, Ben's like, he lives at the end of this. I'm like, well, like, I didn't want to spoil it.
Talon Card and Marajade go on to have these storied like epic journeys and like arcs. I'm like, I just like this trilogy. I don't know if I'm gonna jump into like the whole thing, but like Talon Card's a super interesting character. Like Marajade's interesting. I would read those books. I think I would. follow suit with those characters. But like, I don't know if I could read the whole Legends.
There's a lot. I mean, the Yuuzhan Vong War is going to take you at least like 2 years to get through that thing.
A lot.
But
that's actually some of the stuff I have read was the use. I read the first 2 or 3 books of the.
That might explain a little bit.
Vector Prime, and I was like, whoa.
Like, why you killed Chewie immediately?
Yeah, I got that. That's great.
Yeah,
that was actually probably when I was like, and this book goes down.
Yeah. Just because he was accidentally left off a list of people you couldn't kill.
Don't worry. He'll pop up in an interrogation scene just moments later.
If only. So I was gonna say that Meg, that point of just like having the entirety of the story ahead of you really hit me on this reread, because I read it originally way back when, and then I read them again during my reread, like during my chronological read, and then this is my last time revisiting it after it, and I will tell you all, I straight up cried during the Jana and Jason scene, like actually like shed tears. The birth scene, because I was just like, they're just babies, and their story and like where it goes. Like I literally almost gonna cry now, like just thinking about their entire life now, like just seeing them born again. I'm like, oh, like just like them. And the force thing inside.
I don't know. Han is a little suspect in that scene, but it's it's a little aggressive with the birthing process, but it's all right. Other than that, I love it. Han is always a bit much, I must say.
Yeah,
but he's a
fantastic.
He's a great counter to foil the Thrawn, though. That's all I'll say. Like,
I love that. He's always clever. He's got like a clever way to sort of solve everything, and Zahn leans on him for that. And he sees the blind spots. Like I think you mentioned it off air to me, Grant, but like it's sort of like Han versus Thrawn, and in a secret way.
Yeah, but it's like both... Thrawn's just Han's just lucky, you know. He's just like, maybe we'll do this because it's weird, and and it'll work. But
But doesn't that show the difference, right? Because Thrawn is like so logical and so whatever, and Han just like, I'm just going with the feel, whatever feels right. I'm just doing it. I'm just his vibes, just improvising and just like screwing around, and Thrawn can't predict
Han's
that.
Fully gauges just the vibes of the situation. He's not about tactics. Yeah. But I love Thrawn as a villain. I think Thrawn I see the pitch too. It's like, here is the master strategist for the Emperor that wasn't involved in the major skirmishes of the original trilogy, and therefore he must be better than the Emperor at sieging space combat warfare, and he might be able to win, and therefore the stakes are ratcheted up. I worry that bringing Thrawn back into the canon story, sandwiched between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, you don't have those same stakes of like, hey, maybe this new Grand Admiral can win a space war, a space battle against. It's like he's not going to. Like, sorry.
Are we talking about the inherent issue with prequels? Yeah. Because now that we have the sequel trilogy,
right?
Anything before it is.
That's why I say if you really reconfigure your mindset about the canon, and you kind of really go back to just thinking the original trilogy is the only thing out there, and that's it, and you're basing everything off that. It's like, these are great books. Like, these books are incredible. Yeah. They're like incredible reads, and like I see why they endorsed them. It's like
this is one of the things I wanted to ask Meg. So like, I mean, I know you're tapped into everything that's sort of going on in Star Wars fandom and all that, and a lot of folks believe that Filoni's upcoming projects, pretty much like all of them, Bad Batch, Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and then eventually the feature film, will essentially recreate this trilogy. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think you hoping for something fresh? Do you
Can you neither confirm nor deny?
Oh, right. Do you know and you can't tell us?
I don't know things like that. I'm not that cool.
I do have a lore watch checklist for Meg too. We can get into that. But.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes, I love that. I think something that Star Wars canon has done really well, especially actually in like the animated shows, is drawing inspiration from legends or things that have come before, or in very small ways, I'll say honoring legends. There have been in books, in different things even too, is they'll name a character and it's the name of someone from some random legends book or a legends something. Yes. And it's not necessarily bringing that thing back in, but it's like almost like, hey, we haven't forgotten about you. Here, we'll name this after you. I don't think and I don't want this trilogy, this book trilogy, this really, really amazing trilogy to be like really closely like brought back into canon. I think like when they brought Thrawn into canon, both in Zahn's first canon Thrawn trilogy, because of course there's more than one.
Right.
I know.
In that one and in Rebels, like they brought Thrawn back in such a brilliant way, and it was done so well, and it was done so that you know, his everything that we love about his character, everything that we remember about his character is still there. It's a different story. It's a different time period. There's different surrounding characters. It's different stakes, things like that. But like the core of who Thrawn is and what he stands for and how he wins or doesn't win is the same. And so it's the same idea of, you know, we're taking something that was and we're not getting rid of it because that's not what Legend is. It's still very much important and very much what we're getting now in the books and the shows, and if there's ever going to be a movie again, that too, I guess. So I think they can do that, and I think they should do that, is if they're going to pull things from this trilogy, whether it be ideas or characters or things like that. Like, I think they can do that, and I think they can do it very well. But it's hard because you have, like you said, you have the sequel trilogy, and so there's only so much, I suppose, that you can do. I don't know. Like, I don't like books being adapted into other things. And that goes like beyond my Star Wars fandom. Like, if I like a book and it becomes a movie, I'm thinking about the Hunger Games right now because I was a huge fan of those when they came out. It's like, there are reasons why a book is a book. There are certain things that are magical about a book or a book trilogy that just can't translate onto the screen. Like, there are exceptions to this, but you can do a lot of things, but it's not the same.
I can think of several scenes in this book that probably wouldn't translate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's like, I love that they might bring some ideas back, or like, you know, so a moment might make you think of, oh, I remember a moment in this book that is kind of like this. I think they could do that, and they might do that, and they might do a really good job of that. But like, I don't know where they're going. If we're thinking about like the Ahsoka series specifically, I haven't seen it. I don't know where they're going with it. It could, like, a lot of what happens with these shows is we're shown in the trailers like the stuff from the first 1, 2, maybe 3 episodes, and then we have no idea where it's going after that. I'm thinking of Andor. Like, we kind of knew what it was about. We knew who the main characters were. We knew what the time period was. But you get to like episode 4 and 5, and like you have no idea. You may know where it ends up because you have sort of like a sequel. You have Rogue One. You know what happens, but you don't know. And I think that's like what they have to do now with things like Ahsoka, with The Mandalorian, is you know what the end point is. You know that at some point the First Order is going to show up, and all these things are going to happen. But you don't know how you get from now to then. And I think they could do some really cool stuff with that. But I really don't know where Thrawn fits into this, especially because, you know, where he ends up at the end of Rebels compared to where he's going to be now. We may learn a lot about that or not. I don't know.
Yeah. We
could learn. I feel like they could do something where you think you're going to have a lot of your questions answered, and they don't. Yeah. They're like, here's some stuff, but they could be really mean, and they're like, you have to watch this next show to find out, which you can think whatever you want about that.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. I like the mystery. That's great.
I part of me would be shocked. And by the way, I am the king of making wild swings and being always wrong. Sure. And Ben is the Mandalorian verse whisperer.
Yeah, man.
Like, you should see, if you can go back to,
and like, so what if they just
amazing.
Fought and retook the planet?
What if they just did this? Like, if you go back to our Book of Boba Fett coverage, I think Ben was right every single time, and I'm like, no, they're going to do this. It's going to do this, and Ben's like, no, they're going to do this. Anyway, so take this a grain of salt. But I have a feeling. there's going to be no answer to the Purgle question with Thrawn. Yeah. I have a feeling he's just back. And he's back. Yeah. And that's all we know. And maybe they'll deal with it at some point. But I feel like, but at the same time, I mean, they introduced the Purgles in live action. We've seen them. So maybe, I don't know if I'd be shocked. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we also know Ezrabridger is going to be a
really
major character in the show, and it's safe to say that it's not going to be heir to the Empire in as many ways as we think it might be. I think Ezrabridger, there's no Jeruis Sabaoth character. I think we have these two new Dark Jedi characters in the trailer that we won't talk about too much, but they look like they're going to be major characters in the story.
And they're probably Dark Jedi, right? Like that's what people are guessing.
Clones, Dark Jedi, fringers,
both things.
deep space.
Yeah. So it may not be Jar Sabaoth, but it could be.
Know.
And Meg, maybe you can help us with this. I know it's a deep cut, but Adam swears he read.
No, I don't. He
takes it back, but I also think I saw it too. That there was Luke had a line where he's like, "Oh, this could be like that other Dark Jedi I saw a while ago," like random throwaway line in the first novel in the Thrawn, like first
in the Heir
to the Empire, right? And he's like, "Oh, it could be like that Dark Jedi, like the one I saw before." But we did like a word search through the text and couldn't find it.
Like literally online. While they were.
Is that ringing any bells?
About?
Yeah. Is that ringing any bells for you, Meg?
No, I don't remember
that.
that.
It shouldn't because it didn't happen.
All right. But both of us had the same premonition, so
I went through. I think I just. So I also the difference with this one is I listened to these on audio, which by the way, awesome listening to it with I love the production level for the audiobooks on Star Wars and hearing Mark Thompson do all of the voices. It's so good. Mark Thompson
is amazing. Han is incredible.
Han is so good.
Lando's weird, but I still liked it.
Yeah. Lando's interesting. It's a choice. But no, it sounds great, and I think listening to it while driving or doing the dishes or doing something else, because that's my life now, is to be able to sit and read is not a reality other than like the half an hour at bedtime. So to get to do my spreadsheet of I need to listen to 48 minutes every day to get through this by the end of the week.
1.5. Yeah.
1.5. I'm not an amateur. It's 2.
Adam listens to it at
2x.
Come on,
levels.
2x. But
it actually sounds like
I think you just download.
Yeah, just my eyes are just darting back and forth. I'm just intaking data. No, but I feel like it's I feel like I must have just conflated when they were talking about the Dark Jedi in their version of the Clone Wars, or I'm pretty sure that's after doing the word search. I bought the book for $3 on Kindle to do the word search. So I now own it in audiobook format, Kindle format, and softcover format in the Essential Legends.
That's right.
I know.
Bob Iger is just making it rain in his office somewhere.
Just waiting for all the actors to lose their houses. Anyway, whatever.
It's wild too to be a completionist now, because it's less and actually this was a quote from, I think it was Raquel. Was it Amy Raquel? Was that her name she said she had a great quote from your podcast, Meg, that was like being a researcher, I feel like I know everything about Star Wars, and then I feel I don't know anything about Star Wars, and that can change within 30 seconds. And that resonated with me so well, because I'm a completionist and I'm trying to organize all this stuff for my own enjoyment, no other reason, and also this podcast so we can talk about it. But it's to rationale. We first learned about Wayland and Mount Tantus in Bad Batch, and so it's okay, what were all the things we heard about Mount Tantus there? And I'm imagining what was animated versus what's there, and it's just there's all these disparate things, but there's so, like you said, Meg, there's they pulled these little nuggets, and it's just I love this character, so I'm gonna write them into my book, and now now they exist, and then but there's also now Filoni's responsible for all these things, and he's just boom, 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 all this heir to the Empire stuff across all of his various media he touches.
I was thinking, in lieu of a summary, we should just dive into sort of lore that's in this book that could translate to Ahsoka, and we kind of just go through them and each checkbox, just did.
I like that. That's a great idea.
That's a certainty, because we have that in Bad Batch. So we are 110% getting Wayland.
So that's not happening now. That's definitely not happening now. But I love that, Grant. Yeah. I love this idea, because I agree, Meg. Just kind of echo what you said earlier, is I was so certain we were gonna get an Heir to the Empire remake, and the more I've thought about it, as I'm with you, like I don't want that. So I'm gonna say we're not gonna get that. Like I love the idea of borrowing elements or referring to it, but like similarly, the more I've been reading and watching, like,
Have
I feel
you
like
watched The
I've increased my
Mandalorian?
intake. Yeah,
You see where one of the threads is going? Okay, all right.
Let's talk. Let's talk 100%. Let's talk about it. We will get elements that are borrowed from it, which I think it's there.
Okay.
But I agree. Like the more I'm so done. So I, on a non-Star Wars kind of related to similar to the Hunger Games, is I love The Expanse, the show The Expanse, and so I just started reading the books, and so I just finished the third book, but my brain can't stop going whenever I'm reading it. Going, wait, who played this person in the show? Did this scene happen in the show?
Right,
Did this happen?
right.
And I'm like, brain, stop it. Just enjoy this separate thing. But my brain can't. So I'm like, I'd rather have like two separate things. So I'm hoping they're going to do their own thing and maybe borrow elements. That's all. So Grant, what do you,
okay.
cloning
Mount
teams,
Tantus, we
cloning
covered that.
Jedi.
I'm saying yes. Yep. I don't know what you guys are saying about Ahsoka series and further Mandoverse, the film and things like that are upcoming. I'm just saying. I have to think Mount Tantus from these books is going to be explored in the actual canon.
It's a good setting.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want a setting for an action piece or for
the
climax,
Thrawn
really
doing like the
compelling.
hit and fade kind of cloak and dagger attacks with like timed turbo lasers, like cloaked cruisers with timed turbo laser stuff like around the galaxy. Is that a possible beat in canon? Do we think they might use that? Like just how he does those hit and fade attacks, like.
Like shooting through the energy field.
Yeah, and that sort of stuff. Do we think that's going to be a pivotal thing that they kind of grab onto and they're like, let's bring that in. That's great, Those sort of tactics, I would say. Maybe not the asteroids in Coruscant.
Oh, not exactly
that's the one I didn't
that.
think would translate. I was like, that would not translate to a movie because no one would watch that. But it's.
I don't know.
Would you watch that? I don't know. Maybe I would. I guess.
I think it has to be something new. It has to be something super clever, but something fresh. But yes, I mean,
I think we're gonna get the master tech, the master technician.
I didn't
Thrawn.
get much master technician, and this might be a hot take, but out of Rebels, like he did a lot of like important things, but I didn't feel the like Zahn, like the pincer maneuvers and the like.
It was no Dark Force Rising or.
Yeah, or I mean,
and
certainly not a Chiss Ascendancy or something like that,
or a Chaos Rising or whatever. One of those Thrawn Trilogy books is like out of control naval warfare. But
that's what
I felt it in this book. It was there. It just you get more with Talon Card and the Smugglers Alliance and Akbar. You get more with other tacticians in this book, so it's just split.
I think just in a 22-minute show, there isn't enough time to show it. Like all they showed was like his main maneuver, which is like you're trapped now with the two. What are those ships called? They're like not Vindicators, but they're
Interdictors?
Interdictor class. Yeah, the ones that have the gravity well, so you can't jump to hyperspace past them.
Yeah,
and that was his
out.
that was his like signature move. Once those were in place, you were stuck.
He kind of had it,
but I hope so.
This one though, he was kind of like, this will be be easy this time around. Or I felt like that was sort of the mentality.
No, I mean,
it was all.
His big Rebels thing. Which I really loved what they did with his Rebels thing is that like he wanted the TIE defenders. No, the TIE
Defenders.
TIE defenders. Yeah, the three-wing TIEs versus that's more of a. I love that towards the end of that series. That versus the Death Star was such a great way to set those two characters
that was the
up
book
against
in
each
the
other.
novelization.
Okay, can we throw the
but also in Rebels.
It mentioned a little.
He mentioned, but towards the end he referred to Project Stardust and he referred to Tarkin and he was talking about like you need to give me all the money basically, all the credits basically.
Yeah, and he was trying to prove it out. What about you, Meg? Is there any lore you think that's going to translate over into some sort of live action affair?
It's a really big question.
Go for it.
Please.
Do you think Thrawn is going to survive the Ahsoka series?
I mean, that brings us to another checkbox in the lore watch, which is the note breed.
Question.
Yeah.
The note breed. Rook, we know exists in the animated shows.
Mm-hmm.
We just completed this book. This is how he dies, as Rook stabs him in the chest. And it's such a beautiful scene too. It's like death is
And
actually
it's
wonderful. It's
great.
like wonderfully tragic and fitting. And I was like, this is
Thrawn appreciates the like aesthetic value of his own murder.
He's like, nice.
Yeah,
Blood
just
pooling on
that.
my shirt looks awesome.
Yeah.
Modern art. I love it.
Is
I was
Thrawn
like,
going to survive?
he's pretty
Ahsoka?
pleasant for dying right now. This is wild.
Yeah, I would say I'm gonna say yes, he's going to survive based on the fact that we've had about 1,000 episodes talking about how he would be a fun villain in the sequel trilogy or sequel affair. And I just
Yeah,
I think they just
that doesn't
wanna-
exist though, really. So,
Well,
no,
I mean,
Yeah.
the new Jedi Order is going to happen.
I don't think
right?
Lucasfilm would be thrilled about like
Yeah.
patrolling around one villain into a bunch of different
Yeah,
things.
you're right. But I still feel like they don't like to waste a good resource. So I think like this series, and I don't know if he survives in the next duology. I assume he does since he has two books.
No. So Ben, spoiler alert: he doesn't survive this series. Thrawn is dead.
Oh, he's dead. Oh,
he's
Dead.
dead.
Yeah.
He's not even in the Thrawn duology.
That's General Tierce.
That's another
Or
Chiss.
something.
That's another
Oh,
Chiss.
okay,
That's a
good.
look-alike.
well, see, that makes me feel
Yeah.
so much better. Then yes,
Sorry to
Cheers.
also spoiler alert.
Well, that's why I
anyone
assumed
from the
you were
old
asking
Go to
it
our next
'cause-
episode.
yeah.
No, he's
That
dead,
makes me
dead.
so
Like,
happy
I
that
think-
they actually killed him. So yes, I'm rooting for him to die.
I see. I'm of the opinion that he's going to survive because I think Timothy Zahn's biggest regret when you read all of these books is that he killed Thrawn
Yeah.
off.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna write Thrawn for the rest of my
Like,
life.
he's like, I love writing him. How do I keep writing him? And luckily, like, and then the new expanded universe came along. He's like, oh, thank God, I can write 6 books with this guy. It's awesome, and he's still here. And so, but the other thing is, he is such a compelling villain, and he's different than he's just not another. He's not another. Sith. He's different. I love how scary he is in a different way than Vader or Palpatine. And so it's like, why waste a good villain, especially knowing that there's like a movie probably coming to cap this all off. It seems like I don't know who you're going to introduce as your big bad for the movie.
Yeah, I think he dies in the feature film, assuming that
Yeah,
the
that'd be
feature
my
film is
guess,
going to
yeah.
happen.
Mhm.
And
Right.
this is all going to be building towards that. But I mean, as far as the Nogri go, it's hard to do without a direct rip. And then suddenly you have CGI Leia and you have CGI Luke. Unless it's a different character that goes out there, but it's like they wouldn't do that. It's too.
What if
kludgy
Luke
too.
is Leia? Would be
Dark
pumped for
Leia?
that.
Oh my
I'd be
gosh.
pumped for that. Oh man. I don't think Thrawn can survive either. I'm starting to think Thrawn's like responsible for the revamp in like the Imperial like armor and aesthetic, like, and then he gets taken off the board by whatever dark science and cloning Beaumont Kin is talking about, whatever the Snokes of the world or whatever. I got to think Snoke is Jorah Sabaoth, and it's a different take. It's like Jorah Sabaoth wins, or the Snoke wins, the Luke clone. Or I also think Snoke is the Luke clone. I feel like no one talks about this. It's been like the most shuddered topic on the planet, and I'm like, we all know this is like he's Luke, right? Like I'm convinced at this point, and like
I'm convinced he's half Luke, half
just partially
Palps.
Luke. I don't know. Like to me, it just makes his name's Snoke. It just same suffix. Like I don't know.
Again, just brought to you by the same person who is really doubling down on the ezrabridger, I was also trying to argue as Tarkin for a while, so who knows?
Yeah, I don't know, but no, I'm happy to see what they do. It'd be cool if he was almost taken off the board and then someone takes over and says this is the First Order, at the end of that movie or something. It's like, boom, like I don't know, it would just be a clean exit.
That's the weird thing is like I still remember, and again, also brought to you by the guy who thought there was a dark Jedi that we encountered.
that we talked about for
take this with a grain of salt.
Minutes.
I know, but
I
remember that Favreau talked about this tying into the origins of the First Order when he started talking about the Mandalorian. Like he referred to that idea, and we're seeing it in the Mandalorian. I mean, this last season was kind of right there.
Yeah, they got plenty of runway because I think they're only at 9 ABY now, and it like I think Phasma happens like 25 ABY, 28 ABY.
Well, wouldn't Thrawn reach out to the Chiss Ascendancy after he's been sort of named or titled heir to the Empire by numerous remnant Imperial higher ups, and like wouldn't the Chiss help him out with funds and stuff, and like give him a credit line for like the First Order, basically, like, or something? Like, weren't the Chiss like kind of like waiting for him to get a little bit more power in this galaxy? Or am I just making that up? I forget. I
don't know. We talked about it last week, sort of like, does Thrawn and the Final Order know about each other?
I don't think they can.
Or do they live separate from each other?
I think he invents the
same
tech
goals.
and then he gets kicked off the thing, basically. I don't think he can go on because I don't think he'd want to resurrect the Emperor. That's just my own take. I think, having read a lot of Thrawn books, he's just not the guy who would want to resurrect the Emperor. He's kind of like, there's kind of a...
He'd want to be the
He'd rather just keep power for himself. Like, he wouldn't want to revive the Emperor. So, like, he wouldn't be involved with that stuff. But do Ezra and Thrawn land on Exegol? Maybe. I don't know. Like, who knows?
What do you think, Meg? Like, how do those things jive for you? He's clearly been sent back to the outer regions, the unknown regions, rather. And then, like, he's coming back now. Has he just been hiding and, like, planning his own sort of, like, coup for the Empire? Or, like, what?
I mean, I would like to think that. I mean, first of all, he has to have been doing something out there for all this time. It's a long time.
Right.
He's not just like sipping cocktails on a beach planet or something. He's busy.
Yeah. And, maybe for the first few weeks, and then he's like, I'm over this. I need to do something.
That's a series I want.
I have been to all of the museums on this planet. What am I going to do?
It's just art show.
I've memorized all the art and corrected it.
I mean, I want
that, actually. That would be...
I do want like an audio museum tour guide. Like they do those. I want those. I want him to record some of those and just have Thrawn take me.
I do want like Luth and
the
Rail level
Metropolitan Museum of Art
around like museum pieces. I'm hoping for Thrawn to just admire some art in a couple scenes and not move the story along, and then fans can get upset and call that a filler episode. And I'll be like, that was the greatest episode of TV I've ever seen. But I would admire that if they did something like that. They just let Thrawn talk about culture for an episode. Like, he loves culture.
They spent 15 minutes rebuilding a starfighter, and that was my favorite thing. So if they did that, they can do 15 minutes in an art gallery.
Don't they analyze like a sculpture Akbar made in like 8th grade or something in this?
Yes.
It's like amazing. Like, I need that scene. Like, I need the Akbar. I need the like Akbar-essence, you know what I mean? Like, where is the Akbar-essence in the Star Wars? I need like lots of Akbar. I don't know. Maybe he's overdone. I don't know.
Not at all. I'm right there with you.
He's great in this book.
All right. So he wasn't doing all of these things.
Yeah.
Meg, what do you think he was doing?
I mean, he had to. I mean, it's Thrawn, so he was planning something. Yeah. And so it makes sense to think that he maybe was planning to somehow, even if he didn't know how, come back, take over if he wanted to.
Yeah.
And, be in charge, not have to deal with people who didn't listen to him or appreciate, the things he appreciated. But, I mean, honestly, I have this theory.
Oh, here we go.
Let's do it. This is the place.
You're in the wrong place.
This is the right place.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you all next week.
We have fun theories, but we hold them loosely. If they don't come true, we're just whatever.
Yeah, but what is it? So we're excited.
Stakes.
Let's hear it. What's
fun?
Yeah. I mean, it's not as fun as you're thinking.
I get it.
Okay, so Timothyzahn wrote this original trilogy long time ago. It was a long time. He wrote some other. Thrawn came up again, other places, and then. He got to eventually come back and do these canon trilogies. But this is Timothy Zahn, who got to write Thrawn and then got to write Thrawn again. How you cannot tell me that he does not have like stacks and stacks of notebooks in his closet where he's like, these are all the things I know about Thrawn that I never got to put in books. So like anything could be in there.
Yeah.
So there could be pages and pages of these transcripts of Thrawn just like describing all this art.
Yeah.
I want it. I would pay all my money.
If Zahn gets a co-writing credit, it would be my favorite Disney Plus series of all time. I'd be like, they're actually bringing an author in to like, help write Thrawn, who, he created the character. It's such a beautiful tribute to bring him in to kind of do a monologue or something. Like, I would love that. I would really like that.
Yeah,
or at least to console. It's like, ask him. What do you like? That's like if like Filoni didn't know what he'd been doing, just go to
the guy.
Zahn.
Yeah.
What would have Thrawn done?
He knows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the only one who knows.
It's true. Yeah, it is.
Actually, I mean, so Meg, I'm curious what you think about this too, because we've talked about it. Like Charles Soule and Claudia Gray, like we love all these like all-star writers in the canon. But like we're kind of curious, like why do you think they don't tap into that writing resource as like script writing helpers, and like especially when we're dealing with Thrawn? And I think I read an article where Filoni did talk to Zahn, and I think it was an interview with Zahn, and he was like, "Yeah, I spoke with Filoni," and obviously he's going to keep a bunch under his hat as to the scope of that,
right?
But it's like I want more than a friendly conversation. Like I want him to be like, "Have you seen my notebooks?" And or get writing credits, be in the room with the. Yeah. But what do you think, Meg?
I mean, do you really want to hear my answer?
Sure do.
You know what the answer is going to be.
Like, give them a film each?
Do you think they really want to pay the writers to do that?
No. Yeah.
Because what you would have to do is you'd actually have to pay a writer to do it, and here we are. But I mean, my other answer to that is, I suppose there could also be a lot we don't know. There could be consulting going on. There could be. And they do have the story group too, and that's like they're responsible for pretty much knowing everything that's happening, just so that if there is something in a show, for example, that's referring to something that happened in a book, like they know exactly what they're referring to, and they are making sure that everything's connected and all of that. And I mean, that's why they exist, so that everything in canon is canon. There are very few things that are not connected, because that's their job. So they have them to do that, and the writers are involved in that in a way, because they are doing the outlines and they're doing writing the stories, and they know their characters better than anyone. But that's probably why they probably have the story group as that bridge between the writers and kind of everything else, just because I think it's hard, and I think you have to have that central unit where they pretty much are responsible for knowing what everyone else is doing, because there's no way that someone over here is knowing what someone all the way over there is doing.
Right.
And that's probably why they probably established that specifically, so you didn't have that problem.
I want to chase this a little more, because this is something I've never thought about, and it kind of crushes my soul a little bit, but I'll get over it. So you think it's purely financial reasons. So the story group exists to be a cost-controlled salary group of nerds, which by the way, I would cut off my pinky finger right now to be a part of.
100%.
Yeah,
Dream job.
It's just to sort of to mitigate the cost of hiring extra writers. Why Charles Soule writes Darth Vader as well as George Lucas, or better.
We have talked about the story group quite a bit, Ben. So I feel like we do ponder on.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm thinking of it as a
bit.
Financial placeholder. So it's yes, they've all worked with all the writers,
or
all the novelists, and then they've worked with all the
filmmakers. It's a synergistic,
filmmakers.
strategic,
initiative.
It's hey, how can we connect all the silos within the business? How can we connect all the lore within the canon across all the different media, but also keep things. A lot of times when you listen to the story group talk about something, they'll say, we want to make sure the galaxy feels big. But really, it's keep things broad, because if you keep something broad, you can have Kylo say something like, you should have used a clone army for this. You can have Beaumont Kin say dark science cloning, but never truly elaborate on the cloning stuff. Therefore, we get mandoverse. We get all this cloning storyline. We keep it broad so we can fill in more and more and more elsewhere. I think it's just about building in a sort of space to fill, and sort of and creating more space, in that film.
Yeah. I just love to. I mean, if I would love to see, okay, so maybe they're not a consultant, maybe they're the writer. I'd love to hear Delilah S. Dawson's voice or Claudia Gray's voice. Their actual dialogue, pen to paper, for live action characters sometime, because I feel
but you
like
do look at like a $30,000 like WGA minimum just to like write something, and they're on strike right now. Like I don't know, we're not going to get any authors and writing happening anytime soon until Disney pays the writers. But it's also like,
and they need to pay their writers.
They need to pay their writers, and then also it's like Ahsoka's been shot, like it's already past principal photography, so like we'll probably, if Zahn is a consultant, he's a consultant, but it would just be fun if they did bring him in like a really fun, like he's a co-writer, actual written by credit, maybe one episode, like a culture episode where he's talking about the art and it's Zahn, like
it would be worth the money.
I mean, I'd love it. Ben hates the realism of the business, or hearing that.
I hate corporate greed. It's
I love it.
As opposed to Adam.
I love it. It's the best thing ever. It's not the reason why our society is failing. Anyway, so but what I was gonna say is that like this is also from the same company that brought you the MCU, which I love, but like also I always think about there's so many of these amazing writers that they just don't consult. Sometimes they do, but for the most part they don't bring them in, right? And I just think of like I still remember, like, not to Kevin Smith has his whole host of issues, but like when they brought him in to write the Superman Lives script, which is just an amazing story on its own, he was just like, why are you bringing me in? You have all of these other people who've written Star Wars for 30 years. Why aren't they writing your movie? Like that's the issue, is right? Like they just, I think the corporate brain doesn't think that way.
It doesn't,
right? Because none of these people have written a successful movie before. And so the only reason you write a successful movie is if you've written a successful movie before. It's like, it's this weird, you know what I mean? Like, they don't open the door for anyone who hasn't been a giant name. Like, it's just wild. Yeah.
And I'm not an expert in like this particular thing. But a lot of it is like when you're doing something like a show or a movie, there is no thought that like, oh, someone who's written a novel could maybe do this instead. Like, certain writers have certain skills, and maybe a certain writer doesn't want to try to write a screenplay or a script or things like that. But like, they can, like, if they wanted to, like writing, like storytelling is storytelling, and there are different mediums through which to do that. But I definitely think they don't rely on writers who maybe are responsible for the source material in some cases, and they don't want really anything to do with that. And like, you can honor the story, but I agree. They don't rely on them as much as they should.
It's really just Claudia Gray and Charles Soule that like comes to mind as being like, I would love them to kind of consult on the next trilogy or something. Like, they're just such brilliant minds about the story and just what
especially if they ever do like live action High Republic. It's like,
you definitely got to bring
these are the voices of all of them,
the whole Luminous.
All right, sorry, I didn't mean to get this
no, but I want to name check someone else, but I'm embarrassingly forgetting her name. So I was also yes, but not who I was thinking of. But I would normally, this is when I normally start typing, but I got Meg here, so I put her. But the woman who wrote the also great the Handmaids
E.K. Johnston.
E.K. Johnston.
So good.
Yes. I think that she writes very cinematically, and I think the way those books are put together would really translate. Like I've read a lot of writing. I think it would translate really well to movies and television. So that's another person. Like, give her a job.
Could Sabe be a Disney Plus show? Like, theoretically, yes, right? Like, Natalie Portman could play the part or something, right? I don't know. Like,
well, who played? Wait,
no, I'm sorry. I don't want to pitch.
Was it Keira Knightley who played Sabe in the?
Yeah, Keira Knightley.
I don't know if you're an author. I'd say I got a package. That's all I'm saying. I'll make some.
I mean, she also wrote the Ahsoka novel, which is not the same story as we're getting in the show, but like, come on.
Yeah,
there's a reason I'm thinking of.
That's why. Yeah. Oh,
those books are so fun. They capture like the Coruscant like night vibe better than any of the books. I feel like just the like soirees in those books are amazing.
Grant loves a good soiree. Loves a good party in the stars.
Love a Canto Bite. I didn't understand the Canto Bite criticism. I was like, I love this.
Oh, it's great. It's like my favorite part of that movie.
Thrills. I love it.
Awesome. I have so many questions for you, Meg. All right, so I brought us down into the dregs of capitalism in Star Wars, and like that's not what this show's about.
Pull us out quickly
Can we do something pithy here? Can we just do a little round robin? Favorite parts of this book. Let's bring it back to this book before we completely abandon it.
Let's do it.
Who wants to start? Adam, I'm looking at you. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite part of this book. So I will say that my favorite part of this book, which is actually nice because Luke has been the butt of my joke. Or it's been my joke answer forever. Yeah. And I now
say these books have been wrongly tested about. I was
talking about looking at me. You're looking directly at me. Even though I love these books, to be honest, I forgot Luke came from this book series until I was like halfway through the second book, and I'm like, oh no, I've been making this joke for years. But I love, and so I still was like sitting there going like, why is it Luke? And like, what's the reason behind that? And I'm like, well, you got to write it in a way that's clear what's happening. You can say the clone of Luke every time, and I'm like, all right, I got it. But like, I forgot why that was an important plot point, and the fact that it connects to Marajade's like whole thing through the book. I think that was my favorite part because I still, again, third time reading this book, I have such a bad plot memory, and so I'm like, even when I was listening to this, I'm like, wait, how does this whole thing resolve? How does Thrawn die? And both times, or all three times, I must have been equally satisfied with how does Marajade break her programming, and how does so I think really just the whole Luke of it all, I will say, is actually my favorite part because I realize I've been dumb for making that dumb joke for
that's
the last 300 and some episodes.
There is a kind of Winter Soldier aspect to her character. It's
so
cool.
Absolutely. Oh, that's the other thing. I don't want to steal everyone else's, but like her thought process of how the whole Luke Vader Emperor thing
was so cool.
Yeah, but I will let someone else talk because I'm going to just say everything and then you won't have nothing left.
It was super powerful when it was revealed to her that Darth Vader was Luke's father, and like she missed that. I was like, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I don't know. Meg, do you want to go next?
I mean, I love a good ending, and I think like if you're just gonna look at this trilogy as an isolated thing, like imagine that there's no other like Star Wars book. It really is like a perfect ending, but that being said, like it also opens up the possibility for so much more, which is exactly what it was supposed to do and exactly what it did. Obviously, because we're still getting Star Wars books all these years later. It's been a long time, and that's so cool. But yeah, no, I love like when I first read this trilogy, loved the first book. First book is my favorite. But getting through, the next two and getting all the way to the end, I could not stop reading because I'm like, I don't know where this is going. I don't know how we're getting to the end. And I love that. I love not being able to predict what's going to happen. And it was so satisfying. And I love that, using that word in this context, because it really makes you want to it's one of those trilogies where you can go back and read it again and be like, oh, here's all the things that I missed the first time. And that's how you know it's a good series.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's so true. It's a very meandering plot, and you stay with it. It's like, okay, there's the Delta Source, and there's people, and Thrawn's out there, and there's this ongoing just trying to deal with a new threat, but it's a very ongoing meandering sort of, and you're like, where is this going? How are they going to defeat this guy? He's just getting stronger, and pretty cool.
I swear my brain is Swiss cheese because I was like, this is again third time. I still have no idea who Delta Source is. Oh, that's
trees.
It's trees.
Yeah, there's also that secret sauce of really upping the smuggler side of the story, and the third act of a massive trilogy. It's always hey, there's some smugglers though too, right? And it's the Smugglers Alliance in this,
Talon Card.
Yeah, I love all that stuff. I really liked that stuff. I'm surprised how much I liked smugglers maneuvering in these battles and sort of Zahn just throwing them in. I was like, this is so cool. And then I don't want to steal yours, Ben, so I think we probably have the same favorite bits of this book. And that
go for it, steal it away, because I just thought of three more that I love.
Okay, good. Because it's just the Jorah C'baoth v Thrawn, just any headbutting that they have is amazing. And sort of something that I love in Star Wars, which is a battle of the sages, a battle of the wits. And I also like that C'baoth restores that sort of enchanted Arthurian side of Star Wars in this novel. And I feel like we're losing that or we have been just slowly been dripping away. And I just want that to come back in a big way. It's this enchanted Arthurian feel again, where he just feels like just so idealistic and sort of, I don't know, self-righteous.
It also leads to perhaps the funniest line in Star Wars history, which is Thrawn saying, I've seen you've discovered the Emperor's private settings. Like the giant stuff out there.
They put him in the throne room in there?
Yeah.
I actually laughed out loud while I was driving.
The fact that he's like, oh no, I need giant head setting on my holo projector.
I've seen you've discovered.
Yeah, and then it leads to like an awkward silence where his like giant head, like I'm imagining like Kang or whatever, was just like looking awkward.
Stuff is incredible too.
Yeah, it like works if you're like 100% confident, but it's like if you're at all sort of like, you know, self-conscious, you just
uncertain,
look, it's just right there in 8-foot projection.
Yeah.
No, I mean, so that was going to be mine. I again, Grant and I talked offline,
so
but
good.
There's like the comic connection between Thrawn, and I know you were like making fun of people thinking it's funny, and no, it's great, but like you know, comedy is a part of Star Wars. And
100%.
And I mean, there was the other scene. It was just like there was this long like dialogue between Pelion and Thrawn explaining. You know, it's always like Sherlock Holmes and Watson explaining these.
They may
really
or not be
detailed...
talking trash about Jaruus, but
they weren't. They were talking about something totally else.
Oh,
and then in like all, you know, like Trump all caps, it's like Grand Admiral Thrawn, like a thunderclap, and him like stomping in. It's like he's like a giant like toddler. With like force sensitive toddler that's just like, this is my empire, and they're like, sure is, Joris. Yep, we're gonna get you all those Jedi you want. You just go sit over there.
They infantilize him. They're like, you just go back to that little throne room. We'll lock you up there, and like,
you're in charge, buddy. You got it. This is your empire.
I think it's great.
Well, it's
someone who's kind of off, has a few screws loose.
That's so good.
Totally. Yeah, and they just like sort of go sit in the corner, buddy.
Yeah.
And then Pelion's like total like, this guy vibes every time he walks in is one of my favorite things. Yeah. We're still dealing with this guy. Okay, fine.
Yeah. Even though Pelion was probably the guy that authorized the Luke clone and didn't even know it. And they didn't even write about it.
He didn't. Yeah, he got mind controlled or
I think the Meg's point, I don't think a lot of that stuff translates, and therefore Ezrabridger coming into the mix, it might create an entirely new and fresh sort of feel of like, this is the Force user, and like it's a totally new flavor of story.
That's the exciting thing. Is like you said, Meg, like Thrawn is Thrawn, right? They have written Thrawn really well in the new EU, and so I'm excited to see what they're going to do with this character with this new mix of characters and everything else. And I'm like, it's going to be fun.
And Sabine is kind of like our Talon Card or like marajade, like. I imagine Sabine might get all of that sort of story, right? Like that, there's a big chunk of story for Talon Card and marajade, and I'm like, that might just get funneled to Sabine, really, and it might just be a ton of Sabine, which is awesome because I think we just didn't get enough with that character, and it was just all this burgeoning story with Ezra and Sabine, and I think those characters in particular really need a continuation. So I hope they get a lot of screen time.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts about that, Meg? Because I know you did write an article about how this should not be Rebels Episode 5.
Rebels 2.
Yeah.
Or season 5.
No, I would love to hear like a pushback. I like pushback. That's my favorite thing of the year, honestly.
I could vouch he really does.
I love pushback.
He and I push back against each other.
I learn new things when there's pushback. Like when there's dissent, I learn new things.
Yeah.
I just love that.
I mean, I'm all for like getting more of these characters. Like, give me more Rebels characters. I think that's very cool. I've missed Sabine. I've wanted more Sabine. Never thought we were going to get more. And here we are. And I'm very excited about that. Excited to have Ahsoka back. Excited to see Hera. That's cool. Like this is very exciting. But
maybe Jason. So you're less excited about Jason Syndulla. Okay.
Oh, so Jason is some canonical like crossover.
Again, that name came up.
Yeah.
I remember.
Named after
Sorry. Anyways,
it's not the same, but it's
back
the same.
to your point, Meg. What are you looking forward to about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think like Rebels the show ended perfectly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that was by design. And I think, that their story, the story of the Ghost Crew, how they met, how they evolved, how they came up against this force and were victorious in the sacrifices they had to make, all of that. I could talk about Rebels forever, but it was perfect. And we are getting these characters back in a different context. It's been a long time since we've seen them.
Mm-hmm.
They've all been through things. We know some of that and don't know a lot else that's happened. And it will be good to see them again. It will be good to see like how they play important roles in whatever this next part of the story is going to be. But it's not a Rebels sequel. Like, it's not like we're not getting the Ghost Crew back together. Like, there's going to be something in the way of that, even if that's what they were trying to do. Like, someone's going to be like, well, I don't want a part of that past anymore. Or like, we don't know where all these characters are at when we're going. It's going to be like the Luke effect in The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi. Like, in a very different place, been through a lot, has changed, is a different person because of what they've been through. So like, we're not going to get the Ghost Crew that we had in Rebels. And that's mainly why it can't be a sequel, because these characters are returning, but it's not the same. It's also not Rebels. It's these Disney Plus shows are still suitable for children, but they are much darker. That's another reason I'm really looking forward to Thrawn, because I loved Thrawn in Rebels, but you know, he could only go so dark because it was Rebels.
What if Thrawn comes back into the fold and he's like all bedraggled and he's like, who cares about this war really? Like, we don't need to fight. I mean, like, forget about it.
Why don't we all just get along?
Let's just get some calamari, hang out on the beach. Like, you know, like, what if he's just bedraggled and defeated when he comes back into the galaxy?
That's the great thing, is we don't know.
It could be, like, right? One Purgle ride could really, you know, change a person.
I mean,
who knows?
They can misdirect these trailers.
Yeah.
It's not like they haven't done it before. And so, like, we think we're going to get all these characters back.
Tears.
It's not going to be the same.
Yeah. No, every time they show me a character, I'm like, am I seeing your entire appearance on the show, or is this, or do you have like 6 hours? I never know, which I love.
Yeah.
But I'm like, the other thing that just keeps sitting in my head is like Ezra and Thrawn got dragged off into the unknown regions or somewhere else, and like that is a story that needs to be told at some point, or like there's got to be something there. Like he was connected to a Jedi for some amount of time. I mean, who knows? It could have been like they just went in different paths, but like I still have my whole like my whole thought.
Can we go back to the hot take? Adam's hot take from like
super
4
dark
years ago that is like still plays.
If we're talking about the new Thrawn trilogy that Zahn wrote, we know how the Chiss use Force users, right? The Force users are the navigators on the starship, so which is my favorite
favorite theory ever.
Yes.
He's trying to get back from the unknown regions. He may not have a hyperdrive or able to calculate it, but he has something he knows from being a Chiss that can get him the thing. So like, I want this, like, he basically just like has like pinned Ezra up and is just using him as a navigator.
And High Republic books with Sentek, what's her name?
Mara
Senteca. Yeah, like we just have this kind of broken Jedi, and that would explain why he's been out of the fight for so long, but he's still like, he's this powerful Jedi, but he's been kind of broken by Thrawn and needs to come back from that. Like, I
fully endorse that.
That's my
Adam thinks he like plugged him into a hyperdrive, like Ezra into a hyperdrive, like into like the boards, and like it's like Seven. He keeps him alive with like heroin and like
kind of. I mean,
tree air fresheners, and like just like makes him do his like hyperdrive.
I have like a really dark, like, him just hanging and just being like there, just like hanging there. Anyway, but like but Meg, that's the other thing.
He just used the Purgles. Like, you'd think Thrawn would just jump on Purgles.
Well, you know, I mean. But Thrawn has a tool that he knows how to use, which is a Force user, right? A person who's connected. But I do. Part of what I love about the Disney Plus stuff is you can is like you can go a bit not probably to the levels that I'm envisioning, which is probably a good thing. But you can go a bit darker.
It's like Hellraiser over there.
Yeah.
A little bit. What change? All I keep picturing is like, you know, alien aesthetics. There's a lot of chains, and whatever. But
some Geiger sort of
spinal
column.
I did read somewhere that half of Ahsoka's series is going to be before that iconic scene where Ahsoka comes to pick up Sabine at the end of Rebels. Do you know which scene I'm talking about? Yeah, in the tower. And then half of it is after. And again, I don't remember the source, so who knows how credible it was. But I mean, we did see in some of the trailers that exact scene, like Sabine touching the mural and, you know, all that. So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense for them to really I mean, to explain that a little bit, and how fun would the like buddy cop Ahsoka and Sabine adventure in the unknown regions be?
That's what it looks like it's going to be. I'm psyched for that.
Which is great, because that doesn't feel like a direct continuation of Rebels.
Yeah.
It feels like what you would do with these characters, because I'm with you, Meg. Like, I just having finished my Rebels rewatch, I'm like, is that like, was that the best ending of any Star Wars thing kind of ever?
Yes.
And that may be like hyperbole, but it's pretty freaking great. Like I still remember watching it when it was happening, because I think we actually covered it on the podcast. I think that's how long I've been doing this thing. But like rewatching it now and watching it in like 2 episodes at night in bed was just like watching everything happening, remember where it's coming, and watching like Ezra's lesson that he took, and just watching him make those decisions and watching the crew around it is like, it is
powerful.
It's like pure Star Wars. It's like all the lessons are learned. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So I don't want it. I don't want it to be like, and then this happened, and then like I don't want to undo it. I don't want to do it. Like, I like these characters, but like tell a completely different story, a new story.
Yeah, I'm excited for what's coming. So should we rank Thrawn and
I
call it?
I have one more question. All right, so
all right.
this is a little edgelordy too, so I apologize, but this is targeted at Meg. So we're talking about Ahsoka, and I'm curious how I assume you watch. I know you watched Tales of the Jedi, and I know you're a big fan of the Ahsoka novel. And it's just because we're just talking about, like, I really think Rebels is a perfect Star Wars, and Filoni is responsible for that. We did a whole series, Meg, that you're probably not aware of, called Pillars of Star Wars, which is essentially a checklist of things that if you were making a new Star Wars that you'd want to include, that you kind of have to include, and then beyond that you can do whatever you want, right? And so, like, you know, those are all these things, and really, like, Rebels checks all those boxes, and then just has the real, like, Lucasian, you know, spirit in there. I'm preaching to the choir here, but so this isn't me bashing like Filoni, but I'm just curious. I know you saw those like Ahsoka series, and how it just kind of, that Tales of the Jedi kind of, not retcon, that's like a harsh word, but kind of changes a little bit how Ahsoka sort of meets Bail, and then like ties in with the crew, the Ghost crew.
You want like my thoughts on that?
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, there was a question.
No,
there.
There was a question mark there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
You now talk.
How do I podcast? I don't know.
Is this podcast?
I never do it. I've never done it before.
Me podcast.
So how I kind of tend to think about this, because this kind of a similar thing happened between the Ahsoka novel and the end of the Clone Wars, because of course the Ahsoka novel was written before season 7 came out and that last episode came out, and there's similarities but there are differences. And so ever since then, and when this came up again, really how I like to handle that, because it's easy to get upset about it, because you're like, why are you undoing what happened in this amazing story and you're doing it over? How I like to think about it instead is stories can be told many times in many different ways, in different contexts, in different mediums. If a different person is telling, it's kind of like if a different person is telling you a story they've told someone else. The framework is going to be the same, but some details might be different, just because that's what happens with stories. If you tell the same story 20 times, it's going to evolve. That's just how it works. We come up with new things. That's how I like to think about things like Ahsoka's episode in Tales of the Jedi being different than some things that happen in the book. The Ahsoka novel is E.K. Johnston's story. It is the story that she told. It's her story of how Ahsoka got from the end of the Clone Wars to where we see her in Rebels.
Bail Organa. That is really,
yeah. And that's her take on it, and this is how she became Fulcrum, all of these things, all this important information that you get. If you haven't read the Ahsoka novel, please do that. Listen to it. That makes it even better.
Yeah.
So when we get things like this that are slightly different, it's kind of like, well, that's the version of the story that Filoni wanted to tell, or that's the version of the story that fit best with the other parts of the story that weren't in the novel that he also wanted to tell. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you can treat those two stories told by different people in different mediums as like honoring the same story and honoring Ahsoka's journey and her legacy, maybe told in slightly different ways. And like the details are important, but just because they're different, they really don't change the outcome. Ahsoka still ends up
with Bail
as Fulcrum. She still ends up with Bail. She still ends up doing all these things. It doesn't change how things end up. The details, as in any story you might tell, some of them are less important in terms of how you get from point A to point B. So that's kind of how I like to look at it, because I don't like to get mad about stuff. It takes too much energy, and I like Star Wars. So I just like to not, there are ways to like handle these things where you don't have to get upset at that stuff. You can, different stories, different people telling the stories, same endpoint.
Thank you so much for that. That's why I wanted to ask you, because I knew you would eloquently phrase it in the right way. And it was when I just did my Rebels rewatch, I realized I was like, oh, like Filoni's just drawing a line. It's like if you don't read the novels and you're only watching just the animation, he wanted to draw a line from, like you said, from the end of the Clone Wars, or the end of the Clone Wars to the beginning of Rebels, and that's what it does in a fun way. I mean, I enjoyed Tales a lot. But Canon Ben, I need it like there's rules here, guys. Are people following the rules here? And it felt a little loosey goosey, and Filoni can get away with that, and does get away with it when he needs to, but. Now I see it's like really in the grand service of storytelling, and that makes a lot of sense. It's like when you're telling overlapping stories, why tell the same story? Why not tell a different story with different occurrences to make it more fun?
I know. Ben's got that sacred timeline. You can't have it get disrupted. It's like timeline. I'm like, bring it, every idea. I want every idea on the table. I want everything. Also, final thought. Are Sith Troopers clones, guys? And if they're clones, are they clones of? Have we seen the template already?
Whoa.
Sorry.
And is the template Din Djarin? Sorry. All right.
Wait. Hold on. Wait.
Is like
you can't keep and also
for, like the resurrection of the Emperor, and is Din Djarin the template for the Sith Troopers? Like, that's where I would bring it all. Anyways,
let's go to late in the day for you to do that to me.
You can't just do
that to me.
I've just been in real theory land for a while.
This is Grant's superpower. It's just like something that just flips your brain upside down in your skull.
It's like a font. It's like a fountain.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways,
it
should
is.
we rank the Thrawn books? Just our favorite Thrawn books?
Sure. Any Thrawn books ever?
No, I was just thinking the Thrawn Trilogy, the Heir to the Empire Trilogy, and the Thrawn Duology, if we've read them. I have not read them. Transparency. Yeah, I've not.
Okay, I mean, yeah.
Sure.
Maybe
Adam?
We'll leave those out. We'll just do the 6. We'll just do the 6.
No, Wait,
unless you love those books. Unless those books are amazing, Adam. I don't know.
No, those books, I like Zahn's writing, so they're good books.
I mean, there's 11.
I guess they're not Thrawn books though, because it's tiers.
That's what I was gonna get real pedantic with my argument of like, are those actual Thrawn books?
They're not Thrawn books. Okay, let's just do the Thrawn books. I'm gonna go Alliances is my favorite book of the Thrawn books so far. Just the Vader Thrawn sort of like juxtaposition. Like,
okay,
that one is good.
Love that idea.
Yeah.
I love the earliest one. So Ascendancy. I love kind of all of them the same. But I really loved the like Deep Chiss, Unknown Regions, Thrawn just being a boss, rooting for him as a protagonist.
Is that Chaos Rising? Is that one?
It's really the whole
or Alliances has that stuff too.
No, it's the Chaos. I mean, really the whole trilogy. Pick whichever one you want. Ascendancy. Is it the Ascendancy trilogy? Sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, it's treason.
I did just look it up.
I
did look it up today, but
Adam,
any one of those.
You got a fave.
Okay, so are we just doing new canon or all?
Let's
canon?
just do faves. I think our fave.
I mean, it's going to be real basic. It's always going to be Heir to the Empire to me. Like again, because of it's total nostalgia reasons. Like again, I could remember sitting in the way back of my family car driving to New Jersey reading Heir to the Empire and experience this new character. Here's the other thing. I love this question. I could not tell you the plots of these.
Neither could I.
I know.
New canon
All the
Star Wars.
thread
I
lost on me.
I remember reading them and thoroughly enjoying them all. I could not tell you. I remember like the one I remember was the one that you like that specifically remembered are the two that you've already referenced, which is like I do remember
I do remember Thrawn killing
the
people
one
with
where
the
they're
blaster
back and
in-
forth between Anakin and Vader, and then I remember his introduction of being found, which I really enjoyed. Like his
Yes, that was
his like the
that was
flashback of
great.
how he went through. That's the
Yeah.
one that you mentioned, right? The first one. I remember those two. I do not remember the other four, though I remember thoroughly enjoying them.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I
just-
can't tell the
think Thrawn
difference
wields the
between.
blaster in Alliances. That's why I liked it. There's like a bar fight or something. It was like Thrawn actually
Yeah.
does some like there's some action with Thrawn, and you rarely get action with Thrawn. So
Yeah.
I like that stuff.
What do you
Meg,
got,
do you
Meg?
have a fave?
It has to be the first book in the first. God, there's so many. The first canon trilogy
Yes.
has a first book
Yes.
called
Yeah.
Thrawn.
I think just Thrawn,
Thrawn,
right?
yeah,
just
Thrawn,
straight up
yeah.
Thrawn.
Where he's
Yeah.
like picked up
so
off the
that-
planet and he's like brought
Yes.
into the Empire.
Yeah,
that
the
one.
original
Yeah.
Thrawn story.
Yeah.
With
That's what I
Eli
remember the
Vanto.
most. Yeah.
Yes.
Eli Vanto
Yes.
stuff.
Oh
We
right,
need
Eli
more of them.
Vanto.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the
Um,
download. That's the real download.
that
Thrawn
was-
too. Yeah.
Yeah. It was my introduction
Yes.
to Thrawn.
right.
That was the first Thrawn book that
Yeah.
I read, and so, like being able to like meet him at that point in his journey, and like him like not understanding how anything in the Empire works, and just like trying to figure it out. I love that. I have not read it since I read it the first time, and
It'd
I
be
really
a
need to
fun one.
reread it. It's really good. and it's my
really
favorite.
good. No, it's incredibly good. So 7 books, I guess, because that Thrawn,
Yeah.
No,
the Thrawn trilogy,
There's
and
two
then the Heir of the
canon
Empire.
trilogies, and this
that's
trilogy
part of
and then a
the
duology.
Thrawn. And
Duology
well,
doesn't
Thrawn is
We
part of the
decided.
first.
Yeah.
This is
So
great
Thrawn
podcasting,
is
guys.
the first. All right, they're technically.
Oh no, Adam's dropped this
There are
EU
9.
knowledge right now. Oh.
No, there's 9. There's 9 actual. And back and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, because there's the 6 new canon, and then there's 3 because there's 10
11.
because there's the
Three
what?
trilogies
Now
and a
my math's breaking
duology.
What?
That's 11.
Well, we all named our favorites.
No,
I
but
think
the duology-
we've it's a good
The duology doesn't count because it's not Thrawn,
Okay.
but Outbound Flight counts.
Outbound
Thrawn's
Flight
in
does
Outbound
count.
Flight.
Yes,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
you're right. There's Thrawn. Yeah, there's Thrawn in there, right?
So there's 10 Thrawn
Yeah,
books
Thrawn
in total,
has people
or
in it.
12 if you count the
Yes.
duology.
Yeah.
We did it, guys.
But it makes it
Wait,
makes
Outbound Flight
bad.
was a
It makes me
favorite of mine. I fell into that book and couldn't put it down. That was one of those books I couldn't put down for some reason, and I was like, I don't know why. It was just it was almost like Star Trek, Star Wars crossover. It was like deep space mission and
Right.
Star
It
Wars.
is,
Let's
very
do
much
it.
so.
But
Yeah.
But it makes me so happy that Zahn has gotten to write at least 6 Thrawn books in the new EU, which is just
Yeah.
awesome.
very
So
cool.
yes, just to
Yeah.
clarify, it's the Ascendancy trilogy, and I can't tell the difference between all of them, so I'm not going to try. But that doesn't take away from it. I just really love that period of like that's
really
peak
good.
Thrawn for me.
Yeah, the Grisk and stuff. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
The Grisk.
It's like
right,
all
the Grisk.
naval tactics. Like
all coming
just
back to me
hardcore
now.
naval
I
tactics.
couldn't tell you what a Grisk is, but he fought the Grisk, and it was like storied. Like there were many tactics
Yeah.
deployed. It was.
I don't think they ever described what they look like.
Yeah, they never fully described the Grisk.
They're
So,
just
like,
keeping that one in their
fighting-
back pocket.
He's fighting like an enigmatic sort of like force.
Yeah. And I do love how much we get with the Chiss backstory, right? Of
Arlani?
just
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
that culture's like.
Admiral Arlani, I think, or I forget.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he's
It's like all his protege, like his Watsons, like flourish and become admirals themselves. Okay, Meg, I could talk to you for another 6 podcasts, but I'm just going to try and draw a line there as we're clearly devolving.
We gotta pull
and-
the slowest
and-
man shipyards
yeah.
at some point. You know.
And we'll give you the final word. Any last thoughts about this glorious experience that was the original Thrawn trilogy, or anything else?
I definitely think if you're out there and you have not read it and you've heard things about it and you're like, a lot of people are hesitant to get into Legends if they read canon because they're like, I don't want to get confused. I think there is a ton of value in going back to this original trilogy and seeing where it all started.
Yeah.
If for no other reason than that, because this is why Star Wars books exist today. And I think that's just in itself is important. And that's not even counting the fact that the trilogy is just amazing. And I think listen to it if you don't have time to read it. I mean, listening to it is just as good, if not better.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark Thompson. But yeah, like you're gonna be fine. And I think once you don't have to, if you're gonna get into Legends and you haven't yet, you don't have to start with the Thrawn Trilogy. You can start with, I guess, whatever you want to. But I think if you do start with the Thrawn Trilogy, it is a lot easier in a lot of ways to then go off and decide where you want to go from there, because you can keep going in chronological order. You can go to other and pretty much go anywhere from there, because you kind of have an idea of what the setting is, what the characters are, where things are going in that particular timeline. If you want to think of Legends as an alternate timeline, it's not exactly that, but like you can treat it as that. Kind of like showing where the sequel trilogy could have gone. Not that what we got was not good, but it's just a different take on Star Wars and where it went. So do it. Read it, listen to it, whatever you want to do. Highly recommend. I mean, that's why we did
exactly
this
right. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Very, very well said. Thank you so much for joining us, Meg.
Thank
it's
you,
been
Meg.
a blast. I hope we get a chance to talk to you again sometime soon. And we'll be looking for you. I always check every Dork Side of the Force article to see who's the person that read it, and if it's you, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll read that. And love watching you on Instagram
100%.
and the podcast. Now This Is Lit as advertised.
That's all you could say.
Yeah, Delilah Ellis Dawson interview was
100%.
amazing.
Oh, so good.
They're all really great. So, and I learned some things. You described, you had a 15-minute treatise on what is canon and what is Legends. And I was like, I thought I knew that, but after listening to that, I still learned some things, specifically about, novelizations of films, which I was like, oh, it's kind of neither. Okay. Anyways, I digress.
Oh,
it is.
We'd love to have you on
Yeah.
for a novel. I read all the novelizations of all the Disney era films.
Yeah.
And
Is that
I
still?
love them. I think they're actually quite captivating, and they really fill in some blank spots. So it's nice.
Yeah. That's still your favorite, Revenge of the Sith? Is that still your favorite book? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Oh really?
So good.
Because I guess the Anakin Falls a little bit better.
Oh yeah.
Better designed. Yeah, in the book.
Yeah. My wedding hashtag is a quote from that book. It's embedded in my personality. I can't stop it.
Can we hear the quote?
Ooh, what's the whole quote?
Or we don't.
I mean, the end part of it is love can ignite the stars. It's the very end of the book. It doesn't spoil the ending of the book, but it's a very the writing. If you haven't, here I go again pitching Star Wars books. But the Revenge of the Sith novelization is unlike any other Star Wars book you will ever read. That is because of the way that it is written, the things that they let him do with this book. It's not your typical novelization. Some novelizations are more of a straight, like, here are all the scenes, here's what happened. This is not that. You will feel like you're reading a completely different story, even though it starts in the same. Please read it.
Yeah.
I need to tell everyone
that's
that.
the next book I'm reading.
Maybe it'll change your life. I don't know.
No, it definitely will. I think it
is.
was the first Star Wars book I read, and then started me on a very long journey of joy and happiness. Because I was like trying to rationalize Revenge of the Sith, and I was just sort of, and one of my friends was like, "Yo, you got to read this book. It tells it does the whole inner monologue."
They do like more
explains everything.
paternal stuff with the Emperor too, right? In the book, or like the old scripts and stuff. Like I don't know. There's some interesting aspects in there.
It's fascinating.
I still remember it too. Yeah, when I was doing my chronological read, I had a whole debate: do I want to read the novelizations? And I'm like, well, I complete it, so I will. And it was a bit of a slog at times. And then I got to that. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I made myself read all the novelizations.
It's a
was
gem.
Special. Yeah.
It's a gem.
Great
Okay.
choice.
We did it, y'all. Thanks again, Meg. It'll be great. So this was super fun. Really appreciate you being here. Next week, we'll do a little catch-all on Ahsoka, which I know we did a bunch of today, but we'll get deeper into Rebels, Clone Wars, the Ahsoka novelization, all that stuff, and, more pontification. But I'm just going to get psyched up for the live-action series coming in a couple weeks. So that'll be dope. Whoop. So join us again next week for another edition of
Cantina Chronicles.